All right, everybody. I've got another very special guest for you. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Dave Swartz. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Doing good. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well.
I see you got a campaign going that's doing pretty good right now, so you must be feeling good, fully funded.
Absolutely.
So,
Feels good to be fully funded.
so we will definitely be talking about Confederate Monster later, but let's start off. You're never been on the show before, first time, so we got to do that dreaded origin story. So, what got you into this spot where you're making comics?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure everybody's story is a bit windy, is not necessarily a clear, pathway. But, for me, I always started loving comics when I was, 6, 7 years old. My Uncle Joe took me to the comic book store with him on occasions and would just, let me pick out my favorite book. And, I had a little collection going there. And, my favorite thing to do as a kid was just, pick my favorite splash page out of each book and try to draw it as closely to the original as I could. I always knew I had an affinity for art. I did it as more for fun in the beginning. And then I got into high school, played in a band, thought I was going to be a rock star for a while there, and decided, well, maybe I should start thinking about college. So art school seemed like the natural route for me. So I went to College for Creative Study here in Detroit. That's where I'm from, and I graduated out of there thinking I was going to go into video game design, but honestly, it wasn't something that lined up for me. So I went into graphic design thinking that, at least I want to have a job that's somewhat creative. I wound up working my way up to creative director, did that for a couple of years until, I just didn't really like the job anymore, wanted to try something else. And I came full circle all the way back to comics and just thought, hey, I've always kind of wanted to do this as a kid. So let's see if maybe I can do it for real. And that was about 10 years ago. And so I've been doing indie comics ever since.
Oh, so you're doing this full time now then?
Yeah, I'm a full-time penciler, inker. I work for writers in the indie comic book community who are just looking for somebody to crank out their books. So that's my full-time gig. I'm also a part-time adjunct faculty at the college that I went to, College for Creative Study. So I teach design and drawing. But then I do my own thing sometimes. So that's the book that I've got on Kickstarter right now. It's my own creation. I wrote it, I drew it, I colored it, I lettered it. Every single part of the process is all me.
What so you said you're doing some work for hires for other creators. What other projects have you worked on?
Oh, so I think probably most notably Vampire Detective in Space with Kalen Palmquist. I did all the interior art and the covers for that series. I've done some work with the guys at Bad Bug, been doing a bunch of stuff for them. I just did a issue of their series Undercity Tales. So I did issue 2 of that series. I've been doing the coloring for their other series, Don't Talk to the Dead. And I've been doing sort of the frame story that's in between the different anthology series within the Roseblood book. So I've also done some other things. I've done some books for people overseas. I did a book for Morgan Quaid in Australia called Bloodsmith. It's like a Victorian era horror story. Very cool. And right now I'm actually in the middle of working on a book called Dino Knights by Zach Chapman. It's like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they're dinosaurs. It's very cool, very fun 90s style comic.
I was gonna say you had me at Dino Nights. You didn't even tell me anymore.
Yeah, that's a fun book. It really is. I have a lot of fun not only drawing it because it's very different than most projects, but coloring it too, because I specifically kind of created a palette that I thought was indicative of that era of my childhood, in the early 90s.
So I apologize. I'm so bad with names, and I see so many people on the regular. I knew your name was familiar from somewhere, and it's from Vampire Detective in Space. I love that book, man.
Thank you.
You're doing the Versus Unicorn book too, right?
Yeah, actually, we Caleb and I did that earlier this year, and so kind of helping out on this new series he's working on. He's doing another version or another chapter, I should say, of the Versus crossover universe. So I'm doing a little bit in that book, but most of the heavy lifting will be another artist.
That's very cool, man. Very cool.
Yeah, it's fun. Caleb's a great guy.
Yes, we've had him on a few times. He's a great dude.
Mm-hmm.
So, speaking of that, you got your own thing that you're doing. So you have everything. You're doing everything on Confederate Monster, correct?
Right. Yep. Everything. The graphic design, the promotion, marketing, everything.
So I guess a good place to start is, what is Confederate Monster?
So I tell people Confederate Monster is basically a cowboy version of Frankenstein set in the Civil War. So basically, the story takes place 8 years after the original Mary Shelley story, and we kind of catch up with all of the typical characters that you remember. Victor Frankenstein is there, the original monster, the bride, a little bit of a different version of my bride, but the main character is actually Igor. So in this book, he's been hiding out in Virginia for the last 8 years as a reconstructive surgeon named Dr. Daniel Schmidt. So he's sort of just trying to rebuild his life after everything kind of fell apart when they reanimated the monster for the first time. And so he's got a new wife, he's got a great life, but the Confederacy finds out about his dark past and convince him to reanimate their dead army in a rather gruesome way.
So we're following the Confederates in this story, or we can following the North?
Oh no, we definitely are on the side of the Union, but the Confederacy play the villains in the book. So they're most definitely at a point in the conflict where they know they're losing. It's towards the end of the war. So they're really trying their best to find anything at all, even the supernatural, that might be able to help them turn the tide in their favor. So the story of Frankenstein and how he was how he was able to reanimate a dead body sort of caught their attention. And in investigating that story, they discovered about Igor and the fact that Igor was out there somewhere, whereas Victor had been locked up in an asylum for the last 8 years, absolutely out of his mind. So again, it's more of a take on Igor and what his life could have been like after the events of the original story. Because again, Igor wasn't actually even in the original novel by Mary Shelley. Igor was an addition for the original movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of kind of mashing Frankenstein lore together, if you will, a bit. But I guess that's kind of the fun thing about a book about a character that everyone has, known for so long. And it was public domain now. So it's really, I think, an interesting exercise in seeing what we could do differently with these characters and the story.
Yeah, and I always love the idea of mixing in historical events. Like, everybody does the Nazi zombies thing. Like, that's been a trope for as long as I can remember.
Right.
And it's almost like you're doing that, but with the Civil War, and instead of Nazis, we got Confederates doing Frankenstein stuff. It's a really cool mashup.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I did draw some inspiration from some real life stories about the Nazis and how Hitler was looking for a lot of really mythical sort of modalities of power. That was a fairly well documented thing that they were trying to do. So I felt like, hey, wouldn't the Confederacy maybe try something similar and see what I could shoehorn into that concept? And maybe it's not just the story of Frankenstein. Maybe it's other stories of myth and creatures from more of an American sort of historical perspective, because a lot of these classic stories about monsters are largely set in Europe. So I think it's kind of interesting to bring them across the pond and see if maybe we could draw some inspiration from American culture.
Yeah, I love the idea of Americanizing some of these characters too. I mean, they are very American in nature, but like, I think back to like American Vampire and creating that whole mythology of the vampire, bringing it into the American West around the same time that you're playing with.
Right.
But doing this, like, that was one of the things that went through my mind as I was reading the bio. Was like, this feels very Nazi-esque in the sense that they're going after this mythological thing to try to get themselves through the war and possibly win. So it was nice to hear you say that, because it just confirmed something that was going through my head when I was reading it.
For sure.
So you're creating this book. You're on issue 4, and you say here that it's been, what was it, you've had a bit of a break in between issues.
Yeah. So I can explain. So I originally created Confederate Monster, at least the first 3 issues, during 2020. It was my COVID project. So, I had the treatment for this story almost since the beginning of my decision to start this comic book career for myself. I started out doing a superhero story, but along the way, I kind of decided, hey, I'm not really as tested as a writer, so maybe I should try to write different genres and see what other kind of stories I have within me. So the horror story that I kind of came up with was this one. But back then, I don't feel like the artwork that I made for it was very good, or at least it didn't fit the story as well as what I've presented now. So again, I had this, drive inside of me to get back to this story at some point. So when COVID happened, I thought, hey, this is my opportunity to do my own story again. So I decided we're going to revamp Confederate Monster. I'm going to revamp the artwork. And so I made issues 1 through 3. I honestly wasn't really planning on putting it out there until I got it all done. But it just seemed like the more I showed people, the more I talked about it with the people that I knew, just my friends in the community, a lot of people just kept pushing me to do it. They just like, do it. I want to see the book. I want to, get a copy of the book so I can read it, kind of thing. So, I decided, sure, why not? Let's just do a crowdfunder for the first half. And, maybe if we make enough, then that'll help fund, making the second half. And it did all right, but not as much as I would have needed to, continue making the book. Because after all, when we got out of lockdown and, everything kind of went back to normal, I had to pick up the pieces like everybody else and get back to work and do jobs that would pay the bills. So unfortunately, Confederate Monster was sort of put on the shelf. But my wife recently was, talking to me about, my own mental health, because, I do work a lot. Us comic book creators work really hard. So, she encouraged me to take a day and just do Confederate Monster and see what I can do about finishing it up. So I decided to do that, and it's taken a couple months to finish issue 4 because I'm not quite as fast, only working 1 day a week on it. But I'm back at it. I'm happy to be back, and there's only 2 more issues left. So I'm hopeful that by this time next year, or maybe into the fall next year, we'll be almost done with it.
So we're looking at a possible 6-issue series.
Oh, it's most definitely 6. At least this first arc. I have all the scripts written out. I've had them written out for quite a while, actually. So I've had a pretty clear vision as to where I want to go with it. But I also think that I want to leave the door open for maybe more stories that we could explore within this universe. Who knows? I think it would be cool to, do another story that revolves around another universal monster, like a werewolf type character, or maybe even like a creature of the Black Lagoon set in like Louisiana or something would be kind of interesting. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe.
That'd be cool. Do your own little Universal Monsters, Confederate Universal Monsters.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Who knows?
So you say 6 issues. Does that include the 0 issue?
So no, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. The issue 0 is outside of that 6. It's more of a standalone story. It's a prequel that sort of connects the original Frankenstein story with this new one. So it basically just chronicles the night of horror where the original monster was brought back to life for the first time and broke loose and went throughout the village below and just massacred the entire village. So it's a pretty gruesome book for sure. There's lots of blood and lots of destruction. But again, it not only tells that story, but it also sort of explains exactly how the characters that we are familiar with get set out on the paths in which we find them at the beginning of Confederate Monster.
Definitely. And for our video watchers, I'm showing some of the pages from issue 4 here that you got on the Kickstarter. And as I do that, like, so you funded 1 and 2 before. Now you're going for 1 through 4, but 3 and 4 is really the seems to be the focus here. Is that your plan to do 2 issues at a time?
Well, actually, I just want to correct something there. So
Yeah.
the original crowdfunder I did on Indiegogo was for issues 1 through 3.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So for this one, for Kickstarter, it's just primarily focused on a marketing issue 4. But since it has been quite some time since I got the original 3 out there, I decided it's a good idea to just include them all so that everybody can kind of get caught up. And honestly, I've discovered that that's kind of been what people are drawn to about the campaign. Most of my backers seem to really want the catch-up bundles, either the digital or physical catch-ups, which is a good sign. I think it's shows that people are really interested in getting a full sense of the story and maybe not just issue 1 or issue 4. So yeah, I think again it's going well, and I plan on doing just 1 issue type campaigns going forward. So I'll do issue 5 by itself, issue 6 by itself, and then we'll do a nice trade collection at the end.
Very cool. Yeah, and also you did a crowdfunding for it before on Indiegogo, you said?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this is really your first crowdfunder for this book in terms of the Kickstarter community, because
that's true.
There's not a whole lot of crossover, to be honest.
Right.
I feel like I'm one of the only people that looks at both pages.
Yeah, I have found that. I've been finding that. I feel like I'm sort of starting over in ways, and some people may question that, but honestly, when I did the Indiegogo, my community was a little different than what it is now. Just the creators that I worked with and the people that I knew in the industry, they were all using Indiegogo at the time. And honestly, at the time, some of the features of Indiegogo were a little more attractive for me. So I decided to go that route then. But now, like I said, my network has sort of shifted a little, and now most of the clients that I work with or the friends that I have within the community are largely using Kickstarter. So I figured, it's probably a good idea to go where the community is. And so I decided to, switch it up. And at first I was a little hesitant, but I think now that we're, 3 weeks into it, we got about a little less than a week to go. I'm pretty happy where things are at. I think, all I really wanted was to get it funded so that we could continue making them. Because again, there's only 2 more issues left. And frankly, like most stories, the real fun parts don't really happen until the last couple issues. So I'm super excited to get them out there so people can really kind of absorb the story that I've created here.
Yeah, because you're really at the heart of the story right now. Like you're in the dead center,
right,
where everything's kind of building up.
Yeah, things start to really get ratcheted up here in issue 4, and in issue 4, as you can kind of see from some of the artwork there, is all about the monster, or the original monster, and introducing that character to the scene, and getting a little bit of backstory as to where he's been the last 8 years and how he was able to regain his mental fortitude. Because when we see him in issue 0, he is just operating solely on bloodlust and instinct. So he's not entirely the same character that we see in issue 0 when we introduce him in issue 4.
Definitely, and like you said, you've worked with a bunch of people that are working on Kickstarter. You have a bunch of friends on Kickstarter. Did you learn a lot through osmosis, like from working with those people of kind of the right practices for the platform?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I feel like I did a lot of research into not only the campaigns that other friends of mine have done, but what other successful campaigns are doing, and seeing what would work for me and what might not work for me, and seeing what I can do to have the most impact without having to do a crap ton of extras. That's the one lesson I learned from the last campaign I did. I think I got a little too creatively involved with the whole idea of rewards and coming up with all kinds of interesting things. And, it was fun. And I think they were really great. But I did way too much. And it honestly cost me more than it should have.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of people got some cool swag and some interesting things from the last campaign. But for this one, I wanted to streamline it down, kind of just focus on the book primarily. But I think again, like you were saying, it does really pay to look at other creators, what they're doing, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And even messaging them, even if you're not friends with them, and just saying, "Hey, I noticed your campaign. I thought you did such a great job with this, that, and the other. Is there any advice you might be able to offer me?" And I would expect that most creators in this community would be more than willing to, offer any advice. And I've found that to be the case when I've asked for help. So
Oh yeah, I found it amazing the wisdom that people just throw out on this show that I'm like, you could be charging money for this.
yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
So yeah, so you said you streamlined everything, you got it really down to the bare bones, but you do have some cool like swag and different things you're offering as part of the campaign. Do you want to just talk a little bit about why you chose the things you chose, and we'll put them up on the screen as you talk.
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to throw some little things in there that I think most people really enjoy, and a lot of campaigns utilize, like a sticker and a magnet. I think those are they're nice things for any campaign, really.
Mhm.
And as a creator, honestly, it doesn't cost a ton to produce those compared to some other rewards out there. Same thing with like a print. I think having prints on there are really great because not only is it a low price point for a lot of people, but it's also something that can really entice you because it's possibly a different artist. In my case, I hired Christian Dabari and Simon Go to do a really cool variant for me. So not only could you get that as a print, but you can also get it as a variant cover for issue 4 as well. And so there's all kinds of other like things. Like I've got a whole library of my previous work. I got a copy of Vampire Detective in Space issue 1. I've got a copy of Bloodsmith issue 1, both books that I've lent my artistry to, and then a collected edition of Feast or Famine, which is one of my previous books that I wrote and colored, but I had another artist do for me, Joseph Cooper, who's just fantastic. And honestly, I learned so much about drawing just looking at his artwork for years and years there. So Joe and I have worked on a couple projects together over the years. So, but then you can also get a commission for me too if you want to get like a little mini commission of like a headshot of a character of your choosing. I'll even do self-portrait of you or a family member or your pet. It doesn't matter to me. But you can offer me any kind of creative idea, and I'm sure I'll be able to draw something that'll work for you for sure. But yeah, I think overall the campaign is, like I said, it has some interesting things on there. But I wanted to really just focus in on the books because after all, I really need to build up, the fan base for it over here on Kickstarter.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I always say you artists have kind of a little cheat code on Kickstarter because you get to do those commissions, and I know it's a ton of work, so don't think I'm like downplaying that, but
Oh, sure.
it's so great when the artist of the book is like, I also do commissions because obviously if we're contributing to the book, like we love the art.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I do try to do that for some other campaigns that I just contribute my artwork for. So like when I've done books for Caleb. Typically I'll tell him, hey, if you want to throw in some commissions for me as an available add-on or part of a bundle, be my guest. Add that on there. Like commissions are really something that I think is a important thing for all artists to be open and available to. I mean, I understand that some people just have a tight schedule and they just can't afford to do that, but I like to think that I'm always sort of open to accepting commissions, because I think that's a really good way of connecting with your fans and giving them something extra that maybe is super unique just for them.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of people that love just getting commissions from their favorite artists. I mean, the whole Comic-Con business is built on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think I would have ever made a profit going to a Comic-Con if I wasn't selling commissions. I mean, it literally pays for the table and then some. So
yeah, definitely. I'm wondering when this is all done, how many like Frankenstein-ify me commissions you're going to end up having to do. Or Frankenstein my cat or whatever,
right. It's funny you should bring that up too, because I just did a crossover print, I think about a week or maybe a week and a half ago, that Caleb and I announced on both of our campaigns. So his campaign just wrapped not too long ago for Dragon Grit, and so basically I did a print that is my cowboy version of Frankenstein riding this like Franken dragon that's just like blowing fire like crazy. So yeah, it's fun to kind of play around with some different creatures or characters and Frankenstein them a little bit. So yeah, I don't know, who knows, maybe I'll do a bunch. I don't know yet. We'll find out.
That's such a cool image. I now like have to find it.
Was
it on the Dragon Grit campaign?
I'm sure it's in their updates. It's in my updates as well.
Oh, yeah, here it is.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
Yeah, badass. I had so much fun trying to just kind of figure out the composition of this, because I really wanted to give like the sense that it was coming at you. I wanted to also really kind of showcase the dragon as much as possible, and dragons are rather large compared to a little human. So I was, kind of struggling at first trying to make sure I got everything in the shot, but I think at the end of the day, it all came together pretty well.
Yeah, that came out awesome. Is he doing that as a prints for his campaign?
Yeah. So like I said, his campaign just wrapped. So I'm not sure if anybody else can get on this cross promotion, but basically what we were doing was if you backed his campaign and my campaign, you would get this for free. So those who were able to back the Dragon Grid in time, you'll be able to get this for free. But I'm not sure if that's available anymore.
Probably not if his campaign's over.
Yeah, I would say not.
That's still a really cool image that we should take a look at.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you said, you are completely funded.
Yep.
You're aiming for possibly some stretch goals. I see one of them is within reach, which is the Confederate Monster pin.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that one, and that's just like the same as the magnet, just as a pin. Yeah,
the other difference is the pin is all just black and white, whereas the magnet's a full color image. The pins are actually something that I had left over from the last campaign, and I had like a bunch of them. So I figured, I'll throw those on there. If I need to get more, I'll get more. But I don't know, maybe we can still hit it. I still have some time. Who knows? Sometimes at the end of campaigns like this, there's a huge surge. So I don't know, maybe we will, maybe we won't. But again, like I said, I'm just super happy that we're funded so that, we can print the book and we can keep going with it for sure.
Yeah, and I'll say, I know it's a little possibly outside. I mean, you never know with these campaigns. It's like you said, 1,000 people could jump on at the last minute, but just knowing how inertia goes with these campaigns, it's a little out of reach. But I think it's a really cool idea, which is your $8,000 stretch goal.
Yeah,
the radio show edition.
Yeah.
As somebody who loves like the rebirth of these dramatic radio shows as
Yeah.
podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I've always like loved these things and just infatuated with them. Did you have like people lined up for this or?
So my original campaign that I did on Indiegogo, one of the stretch goals was a vinyl album of 4 original songs that I had commissioned from a buddy of mine who actually was in the band with me in high school. He went on to be a music producer. So, I commissioned him and I said, hey, man, if I gave you 4 like titles, just titles, could you make some tracks that would fit, that title? So he was like, yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, they're just instrumental, so they're kind of meant so that you can kind of listen to them as you're reading the book. But I just gave them titles like The Laboratory and The Masquerade Ball, and things like that. And so I don't know. I started thinking about that and just thinking like, how could we take that a little further? And in doing this campaign, I went back to the original trailer that I made for the book. Which is very cinematic, and I put together this whole, production with voices that I did, voices that I had my wife do. I had some sound effects. I had some of that music I was just talking about. So, I made this very, cinematic type trailer. And I think after watching it again, after all these years, I thought, wow, like, what if I did that, but I did it for the whole book? And just sort of did it like an old radio show. And I thought, oh man, that would be a cool stretch goal. I mean, it would take some effort, but I think it would be really cool to do. And I don't know, maybe it'll be something that I still do in the future. Maybe as like an add-on in the future because again, like I said, I would hope that, we could get to the end by next year and I can put together a really nice campaign for the collected edition. And who knows, maybe that'll be like a fun thing we do for the collected edition. I don't know.
That would be really cool for the collected edition, yeah.
For sure.
To have all the issues reenacted in some way.
Yeah, I think that would be really, really fun. Plus, I don't know, I have a lot of fun doing voices. I do them all the time. So, I don't know.
It makes me think, it's a little bit different, but similar. Have you heard of the comic No One?
It sounds familiar.
It's currently coming out. I think the last issue comes out in a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
But they're doing, so it's 10 issues, and then in between each issue, they're doing a radio play with Patton Oswalt and a few other people, set up as a podcast about the events in the book by the characters in the book.
Wow.
And it's a really cool experiment of like mixing these two these two mediums together to create this story and build upon it.
Huh. I kind of like that. That's interesting. Yeah. I'm very intrigued by the sort of cross, synergy that you can get through, different types of medium. I did a book for another guy in Australia, who is basically doing that for one of his properties where he's got a comic book version of the story. He's got a video game he's developing. He's got like a board, like a tabletop game, so it's like, it's all the same universe, all the same characters, but just like you can absorb it in a different like way. So I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting.
I think one of my favorite like radio play podcasts that's ever been done was I think it was Halo 4. Did we have a Halo 5 or was that Halo Infinite?
You're asking the wrong dude.
I kind of dropped off Halo after a while, but I think it was for Halo 4 because I remember whatever game it was not a good game. But the radio play was leading up to the events of it, and it was phenomenal. And I got so hyped for that game up to it, and then the game happened. But but it was like this amazing piece of like advertisement for this game that was this really well done, well produced audio drama. That's set in that world. It's a really cool medium that I would love to explore more one day. I've dabbled with ideas with it, but it is like you said, it's a lot of work. So
yeah, and I'm sure it's even more work than I can even fathom right now. And I'm sure that if I do go down that road, I'm probably going to kick myself at 1 point or 2 points or 3 points. But it'll probably be worth it at the end of the day. I think it would be
yeah.
kind of cool, even if it's just for fun. So
I feel like we all do that in this like creative space. Like oh, this would be a cool thing. I'll do this, and then you get halfway through, and you're like, why did I put myself through this?
yeah, I totally hear that.
But okay, so everybody out there, Confederate Monster is on Kickstarter right now, is fully funded. So we're looking for stretch goals right now. As you're listening to this, there's probably a day or two left for you still to contribute to it. So you can check that out. But if people wanted to follow you further, Dave, where's the best place to send them? You do Twitter or Blue Sky, or what are you on?
Sure. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle on everything is what you see on the screen for those who are watching, but it's Dave Swartz Art. So at Dave Swartz Art is my handle on everything. It's also my website. So you just go to daveswartzart.com. You can find me there and contact me there if you want to collaborate on something, or if you just got a question about what I do, or anything at all. So,
and to everybody out there, you can always check the show notes down below for some of those links as well, including the Kickstarter campaign and Dave's website. So check those out, click those, check out the campaign. Dave, the book looks awesome. We look forward to checking it out, and best of luck with the rest of the campaign, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on, Chris.